rigid structure.
Really?
And that really tickles me pink.
The imperfections in the geometry and the nature of those imperfections.
You know, if I really wanted to make something I considered as accurate or as perfect as I could, I would stop with the pencil. Because, like, I've got a 0.5 millimeter mechanical pencil, and the line weight is always consistent as long as I'm not really cranking on it. And that's as accurate across all the lines as I'm going to make. So if I really wanted to be like, hey, I'm proud of this is technically excellent. All the lines are the same width. They're all perfectly spaced. Everything is uniform, blah, blah, blah. And then there's no room for any other. That's just peak nice.
You see, I like the contrast between that and stuff that's more random and more natural. And what bothers me is if I'm trying to do a clean line, something that's straight. Because the straighter you get it, the cleaner you get the line, the more you see the imperfections in the surface.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure.
So you're going along with this nice, steady, clean, beautiful line, and boom, there's a bump in the canvas. And you fuck it up.
Oh, God. Don't you just love it? But at the same time, there's a couple of ways you could rationalize that and be like, well, you know, life shit happens, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
There are things you can't control or things that were out of your control until you realize they weren't.
Yeah, don't try to control it.
No.
Just, it's good enough.
Like, the bump in the canvas is something that was there from the start, and like, what were you supposed to do when everything was white or black, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I had the same kind of experience with trying to paint something. So if you paint something in too much detail with too much finesse, then the finesse is what captures people's attention. And so sometimes you just have to deliberately make it look like you didn't put any thought into it.
And that's just as hard.
Yeah.
Just as hard.
Yeah. You end up fussing over different things than you would if you're actually painting it.
I don't know what to label my stuff, like, stylistically. I just say it's free-form geometry, and that all by itself is kind of an oxymoronic thing as a label. And and what's the duality of it is just a thing that I accept and don't try to fight or finesse out of it. It's just what it is, part of it, inherent to, and I have to be okay with it.
Yeah. So are you thinking conceptually when you're working, or are you thinking kind of about the craft?
Depends on the piece, and it depends on how much energy I'm trying to devote to it in the moment. Like,
did we start?
Oh, we started. Yeah, my bad. I normally say that, hey, I hit the button, but we're
right.
We're 3 and 45 seconds in. It depends on what I'm trying to give the piece. If I'm really trying to put a message out there with this image, or have some theme to it that I would like to be obvious, or at least apparent. I really try to get my brushstrokes all the same, you know, as accurate as I could do everything. I want to do that. But if I'm just making to be making and painting to practice being my creative self, then I'm just throwing shit at the canvas. Like the piece I'm working on right now, all the technical things I wanted to do, I've done. Like how I've crafted the form and drew out the bones of it and do all the things to set it up to be the geometry part that I like. Now I'm doing the weird stuff that I've never done before, or trying some stuff that I just never thought to do before I started this one.
So you have a planning process?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I knew what I wanted to do for the first geometry part, but then I also wanted to do things I'd never done before to challenge how I work with the geometry part. Yeah. The last really layered and intense piece I did it in a really methodical way because I'd never done it before, as like layering geometries on top of themselves. And then with this one, I wanted to layer random patterns over top of this, but also sort of weave it into the geometry. So I made bold areas of color that are transparent over top of it, but then added details around it to sort of drop the eye, you know, the look of it behind the whole thing.
Yeah, you play with the fields and
so I created that contrast, and then there's also some color contrast too with the light and it being on a black background and some color shifty things. So like that one's pretty tricky. So I've tried to pack a lot in a really small space. But so far, I'm really happy with it. But these experimental pieces, I don't really feel too crazy about invested in one way or the other because I know they're experimental.
They're all kind of like that, though. I mean, they're all experimental.
Mm-hmm.
I had a phase. I used to plan quite a lot. I've been seriously painting for about 30 years, and I had a big sabbatical in the middle of that. And I used to plan things out. I used to be a pretty technical painter, and I used to do sketches and drawings and studies and have references and things. And a few years ago, I decided that I wasn't going to do that.
So can I ask you about the process to that decision?
Well, a lot of my work is very conceptual, right? And there are things that I'm trying to say in every piece, and so I used to hold on to that, and I'd grasp onto that, and I'd plan around that, right? This is what I'm trying to say, and this is a feeling, or this is a concept or something. And a couple of years ago, I found that to be grueling. All these things, too much planning made it really contrived. So you can see some of the paintings I did a few years ago are really put together, really planned and drawn and studied, even though they still have a lot of collage in them. There's still a lot of dripping and throwing paint and stuff like that. It just looked like somebody intended to say something. It was like a well put together sentence,
Oh yeah.
And it lost a lot in that. You lose a lot of sincerity.
Yeah.
And so I started experimenting with a process. Start working.
You sprinkled in some chaos.
Yes. More than a sprinkle. I think that's how I started. It started with chaos, and then I think that's a good way to see it. I'm starting with chaos. You can see there, that's the beginning of one.
Yeah. Lot of motion there.
Yeah, and then they just kind of come together. So I work with them. I try to work really quick. Like I was telling you earlier, if you spend too much time on finesse and technique and painting things, then it takes away from the concept that you're trying to prove. Okay, I have a couple of paintings where I have crowds in them, and when I started those paintings, I started sketching people's faces in the crowd because I thought it'd be really cool, right?
And then you got lost in that in a bad way?
Then I'm looking at it and thinking, some people are going to come up here and they're going to look at that and they're going to say, wow, every single face is painted. And that's going to mean everybody has an identity. Everybody has a uniqueness. This crowd is made up of individuals.
Did that detract from the overall?
Yeah, I didn't want that. I just wanted them to see that there's a crowd there.
Yeah.
There's an outside world, an audience. And so I just did some black and white laser prints of crowds from ball games and stuff and cut them out and pasted them on there. And so now you don't get in there and look at it. It's like, oh, that's a crowd. And then you move on.
Right.
Right.
The notion of alluded to.
So I don't get any points from people for being a great painter. But I feel good knowing that that's intentional.
Well, it is intentional, and you still convey the notion of other or crowd or viewers with that imagery. Yeah. And it's a lot easier on you because you don't have to laboriously task over it for however long that would take.
But it took a long time to get over myself.
Yeah.
Right, and to do stuff like that. It took me a long time to forget that I don't need to impress anybody with my painting skills. I know how to paint. It doesn't matter. Nobody gives a fuck.
Oh yeah, you can cuss and all the shit. Yeah.
And so I spend my time doing like collages, cutting patterns out, and splashing paint and doing stuff that doesn't really require any skill. And so I've developed this process that starts with that chaos, and then I just start working on it, and I keep working on it. And it, every piece is kind of a conversation, where you're taking and you're giving. And at some point, it just kind of gels. It tells you what it wants to be.
I know exactly what that's like.
And you just follow that thread and you finish it up. And I didn't lose a lot of the concepts. And I didn't lose a lot of the emotion and all of that stuff that I was trying to hold on to. Except now I feel it's more sincere. It's real. It's less contrived and less put together, and it's more,
Is that because you're more in the moment when you're making the piece?
It's about the concepts. It's not about the painting anymore. I'm not fussing over how to paint something or how to draw something. I don't fucking care. Just getting it out, getting it on, and it's solidifying at some point, and I'm understanding it, and it's just guiding the piece to be what it wants to be.
Yeah. So do you have You said you had a day job.
Yeah.
So you're in your studio after work. Is that 5 days a week or just whenever?
I try to be in 5 days a week, but it ends up being, you know.
Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 6.
I'm every evening, every weekend, I'm trying to be here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you consider yourself pretty prolific?
I do, and I think part of that is because I'm very fast. There's a period when I'm doing 1 or 2 paintings a week, you know, fairly large things, and it's just because my process allows me to do that.
Right, because you took a lot of the rules off yourself.
Yeah. So I mean, I can splash and drip and just like, you know, scribble and things like that, and that's just as good to me as spending time painting something.
So how long? I don't know if we caught it on mic earlier, but you said you've been painting for what, 30 years?
Yeah, about 30 years, seriously.
And it took you how many years to figure out that you don't need to obsess over the execution?
It took maybe 28 years.
28 years. So you had a lot of practice in a really rigid structure of your creativity. And
Well,
were you comfortable in that, or was that just a thing that you did because you had to?
You're always comfortable in it. I mean, you always think that you're on the right track all the time, and you think you're moving in the right direction, right? And you're just trying to refine your craft and refine your skill and get better at it. And then you have those moments where you figure out you've been fooling yourself the whole time, and you have to come to Jesus, you know. Yeah, it's true in life too.
Yeah, it plays out on the canvas a lot.
Like, you know, a lot of the paintings that I have the concepts come from my realization as I get older that a lot of the beliefs that you have and a lot of where you ended up was just outside pressure. Yeah. And, you know, especially as you start approaching middle age, you get this idea, what the fuck have I been doing? You know?
I think that a lot at 32. I'll just put it out there.
You don't have the success that you always thought that you would have. You know, the things that you enjoy doing are not financially panning out.
But damn, they're fun.
Yeah. And so you have that, you know, that crisis that you have to get through. And I have those milestones with my art too. It's funny how they track. Like, so I told you I took a sabbatical. So I took like 10 years off from painting. I would still, you know, do little things here and there.
Or was that like all creative stuff, or did you just stop painting?
It was stop painting and drawing is kind of a discipline. Just not really having the discipline to do it. So doing a few paintings and drawings here and there. Most of the creative energy I spent. I did some writing and mostly building software and businesses and things. And when I started up again, it was interesting to me to see how my work had changed. And realizing that's because I had changed over that period of time. And being more comfortable with myself and my skills and, you know, what I can do and the ideas and all that.
Did you find any frustrations coming back into your creative practice?
Yeah, just not being satisfied with it. You know? Like, it was funny because you don't really lose any skills, right? You know, I used to love figure drawing, and I did a lot of figure drawing, and I got pretty good at it. And when I started painting again, did some figure drawing. It was still there. You don't lose any of it. But then not really being satisfied with it, like before being satisfied with doing a figure drawing that looked good. You know, oh, look what I did in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And still being able to do that, but thinking, so what?
Right. So it wasn't an expectations thing. It was just like, this is not how I want to channel my energy into
it's not doing it anymore. Like, I don't know if you have that experience, but I have that experience looking back on.
I don't think I've had it yet, but I've definitely been plenty frustrated with things I should have been pretty okay with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it because of the craft of it, or is it because you've changed, or what do you think?
I mean, if I can draw a parallel, I look back at pieces I did when I first started my geometry shenanigans. So they're really simple and pretty inconsistent technique-wise, and I can definitely be proud of that progress. But some of the simplicity of the ideas back then were really spot on, and they're really elaborate now.
Oh.
So in that vein, I can look at stuff nowadays and just be like, well, shit, you know. But it's the techniques and ideas I had then are really different than what I do now, and I can jive with the duality of it because I have to.
I think you're just becoming more complex a person as you get older.
Yeah, definitely. That has a lot to do with it. Like you said, outside pressures, context, like a person's lived experiences. I don't think you can separate that from your output, no matter what, no matter how hard you try, because everyone has their lived experiences, and that influences like every other aspect of your life. How can you like pull that out of your artistic influence? That seems impossible to me.
I think that's what I've accepted. I think I welcome that, because by trying to eliminate all the planning and just having a process and having faith in the process, I'm getting all this stuff still. I mean, the things that make me up, and current events pop up in my work quite a lot, and the culture, American culture, and that comes out and makes it onto the canvas. And I don't have to think about it.
It's just there because it is there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm not deliberately putting that stuff in there. It's somewhat subconscious, but I am listening to it and and taking it where it wants to go.
I don't often make a lot of political art, but I will certainly make protest art. I've made some things that would piss people off, I guess I could say. Yeah. And those have been probably the most fun because it's just like, bam, simple idea. What's the easiest way to put this in paper or on canvas plainly? What serves this idea? What imagery do I use? Like the process to think through these things that I need to have a really short, like idea to execution. Like they move quick, and I really like that because the idea is very succinct. It's a very well-formed idea when you have a really sharp opinion about something because you have the really sharp opinion about it.
I have a piece like that. I am having a hell of a time showing.
Yeah.
And I should drag that up.
You should, yes, please. And I'll say, in my experience, I've had more fun showing the things that I think would be controversial than my work that I feel really proud of. And that's been a really odd thing because I get way more reactions with the inflammatory stuff because I guess it's inflammatory, of course. But it's been really fun seeing the difference in the public reaction between the really aesthetically pretty stuff that I do versus the politically oriented, I'm trying to piss off the boomers stuff. So just watching people walk up and get the thing I'm trying to say and then just go, oh God, and walk away. Yeah. I love that so much.
This is one of the ones before, this had a little bit more planning in it.
Yeah.
And the recent stuff. And this was around election time.
Oh, you don't say. So if you could walk us through this image for our listeners.
Well, it's an image of a sinking boat, and on it are a bunch of figures that are fighting, attempting to murder each other.
Guns, knives.
Guns and knives, draped in an American flag. And obviously about just the political climate that was going around during the election.
That's still pretty active.
Yeah. The country has turned into kind of, we've become really divisive.
To say the
really
least,
divided. Yeah. And everybody has, the odd thing is we all have kind of the same goals and values.
They're not too far apart.
Both sides are fighting for the same thing, but they just despise each other for whatever reason. Right. And it's not the fact that we're disagreeing with each other. It's just we hate the other side for whatever reason. Likely the media or
whatever the context may be.
Yeah. And so that's how I was feeling at the time. It was really evident during election time, and I sketched this out. I drew an under sketch on the canvas. I did do what I was supposed to do, and I finished it. And I don't think it was a failure, but it looks really contrived to me. That concept is really easy to understand when you look at the piece. That feeling, especially if you're an American. But it accomplished what I set out to do. It just looks to me like it was just a setup. It looks like it's something that was constructed. It's not very honest. It's not as sincere as it should be. There was a concept.
So how do you work against that? Like, could you take this piece and make it more sincere from here, or would you have to start all over?
It's done. You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
So nothing's gonna happen with this.
No, I mean I can't. I could. I mean I could repaint it, but it would be a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was successful. Yeah.
So is that actual clothing on there for the guy's shirt? It looks like it for sure, but I wanted to ask.
It's an actual shirt.
Yeah. Nice.
And so I have a couple of pieces now that are more recent that are similar in concept, but they didn't start this way. So they started.
So in the newer workflow that you've got, the less rigid structure.
So let me get another one for you. This was during COVID, during the protests and all.
Yeah. In case the microphone couldn't hear him as he walked away to gather the next piece, he said during COVID with all the protests is when this piece was painted. That's way bigger than I expected. What is that? 4x5?
Yeah, about like that. So this is closer to the current process where I just started.
Yeah,
and
this definitely looks closer to the style we have surrounding us right now.
Yeah, and so it there's no sketching, there's no concepting. I just started, and this is the world at the time, according to me. This is my experience of that period of time.
Also, curtains.
Curtains. That was the last thing I painted. I hated painting them.
They look really good.
But I did it pretty quickly, but it was just fucking grueling. I hated it. It was the last thing I did. So I had all of this, and then I decided this is more of a show than it is reality.
Oh, the theater of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I put the curtains in there.
So I see lots of chat bubbles and distressed faces.
Yeah, and that statement effectively described the culture at the time.
Oh yeah, and it still does. It still certainly does. Was there any rhyme or reason to the pages you stuck in that chat bubble, or is it just text?
Just text.
Okay.
It's always just text, and it's even down there it's just tick marks. Like you get that question a lot, or I get that question a lot. Does a copy mean anything?
Well, I mean, how intentional are you going to be about it? Do you need just to get the idea across, or is that part of the message? What is contained in that spot?
Well,
it could go either way.
The only thing I deliberately do is avoid photographs and things. So it's always just text. It means something or not, I don't know. I think this one has a bunch of obituaries in it. Yeah.
So do you like to work this big?
I'd like to work bigger.
So what's the biggest piece in the gallery right now?
I think it's 5x6, something like that. Yeah.
Is that just because you can just use your whole body and really get into it?
I just enjoy it, like the arm.
Oh yeah,
getting your arm in there.
You get to use all three joints in your arm.
And then they always look better when you take pictures of them and you squish them down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it's easier to photograph the big stuff.
But the smaller things, it's funny because when there's a certain how do I explain this? People receive it differently based on the size of it compared to themselves. So if you paint something where the figures in it are roughly human size, then the size doesn't really matter anymore. If you paint something smaller, people get into it and get close to it, and they'll look at it and treat it like an object.
Yeah.
So there's a certain scale where people become kind of immersed in it. So if you paint a figure that's much larger than people that are looking at it, then it has a different connotation than if it's
similarly
similar size. So I think that's why I like this size roughly.
Yeah, because it's only mildly inconvenient carrying that thing through a doorway.
Right.
It's only mildly inconvenient. I mean, I've worked on big ass walls. I've done murals and stuff, and I really enjoy being physically invested more than my wrist and elbow. It's a ton of fun. The last mural I did was like 8 feet by 35 or something like that. So it was a big piece.
Yeah.
One of the biggest I've done. It was a ton of fun.
Do you like as the audience? Do you like larger work like that?
I enjoy looking at big work because that scale, when it becomes like sculptural or environmental, in perception, I think it's awesome. I enjoy walking around in a gallery and looking at stuff on the wall just as much as anybody else. But if I can walk through or around the stuff, it's way more immersive, and I find that to be more enjoyable.
More of an experience than yeah.
Yeah, the places where I do the murals most often is an art park. So there's like 100-something walls and all kinds of different partitions and stuff, columns. Like there's a variety of surfaces. It's on a hillside. You can walk through all of them. There are trails. So it's an experience to go walk through this place and be surrounded by the art. Like you're literally in it, up the hill, down the hill, in front of you, behind you. There's cinder block walls covered in beauty everywhere. It's pretty neat. It's a cool place to consume and make art. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I always like urban landscapes when you get graffiti and get murals and the planned murals and the unplanned murals and public sculpture and just in the environment with buildings in different states of repair and all that. Just the texture of that I find really interesting.
Urban decay has always been something that has never strayed from my eye. The abandoned building on the block is always something I'm going to look at more.
Right.
Not because it's the abandoned building, but because there's more to it. It's got more character than the cookie cutter shit that's on the block.
Yeah. What I think is funny is kind of the new architecture that tries to look old.
Yeah, get it together, y'all.
Yeah. So there's a lot of decor now, right? It's like country chic. Where it's supposed to look old, but not really. It's still supposed to. It can't look like you found it. You have to look like you bought it.
I have a word for this.
What's that?
And it's not the word for this, but it's a word that perfectly describes this idea. Barndominium. They're a really popular style of, residential architecture right now. And it's actually the kind of house my sister and her husband are about to buy. So it's a good thing she doesn't listen to the podcast right now.
I hope she likes it.
Yeah, me too. It should be nice. I've seen the plans, blah, blah, blah. But, that concept, looks like it's supposed to be old, but it is new. You definitely bought it,
right.
Barndominium. Yeah. And that is a thing. Let's look vintage, but not be vintage.
Yeah, I think it drives me nuts. That's stuff I don't mind living in a rundown old shack. I wouldn't mind that at all, and I wouldn't feel the need to decorate and try to make it look new.
I mean, I don't have an affinity for fancy things, so I can't say I need them. I like nice things, but not fancy things, and there's a big gap there.
Yeah, there is. Definitely is.
I like nice things. I like things that work and work well, but I don't need them to be 24 karat gold things that work really well.
So with your art, do you feel that way? With the art that you're making, do you feel it's decorative, or do you feel that there's a reason for it to be?
So that's a complicated question because I can answer that 3 different ways.
Answer the honest way.
The honest way is the honest thing is that my creative practice is a healthful practice for me. It is the thing I need to do to maintain my overall well-being. It's the mental exercise to accompany my physical exercise. So it's really important to me that way. But also, it's an exercise in getting the things that come to me out of my fucking brain, because if I didn't, they would just dam up and cause me mental anguish. It would just be terrible.
It's compulsion, isn't it?
Not working these things. I don't claim all of my ideas, and that's kind of a question I throw at people. How many of your ideas are yours versus how many just come to you when you're absently minded washing the dishes, and what ratio that is in your work. And honestly, mine's 70-30. The ideas that come to me often end up on a canvas more often than I have ideas that I say are mine that I try to express. So I'm more of a conduit than I am a creator most of the time. Yeah. And I have no issues with that because I like the things that my brain tells me, hey, this is cool, you should probably paint this. I really enjoy it. Aesthetically, stylistically, the workflow I have to do them, it's fun for me, genuinely. So I never shame myself when I have this idea for this painting and I know it's going to suck, but it's going to be fun because I trust the process. I really enjoy how I do my work. So it's really hard to not do it when I have something cool pop in my head,
Well, I have a similar experience. Not all, like I told you, I have a process. They don't always gel. So I have a lot of stuff that just didn't work or that I gave up on. But that idea about what's yours and what isn't yours in terms of ideas is something that bothers me.
Bothers you like how?
Well, how much of the ideas that I have, how much of the paintings are me,
Yeah.
and how much of it is just, the stuff around me, biology.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I come up with an idea that I think is awesome and unique, and I fear I thought of it, and then somebody else,
You see it somewhere
you see
out and
somewhere
about,
else, somebody
totally
else
foreign to your
right.
life experience. Yeah.
like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then it makes you think, well, you're really just the product of the world,
Mm-hmm.
of your biology, of your circumstance, your experience, and all this stuff. And there's not a whole lot that you can do to think outside of that framework.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're given, and that's all we've got.
Yeah.
And when I see stuff like that, I have two reactions, like, oh yeah, that's cool, or I'm jealous. But then like the jealousy itself is a direction to push into, because like, how can I do that, or
Yeah.
what part of me is drawn to that kind of thing. Like being introspective about that reaction is something I've done a lot for my creative self, and it's been pretty positive.
Positive how?
It's pushed me to learn things more often than not, because if I see something, I'm like, damn, how do you do that, or what technique is this, or what material, like I like the technical information of things that don't look like they should have any.
Yeah.
The hows and whys, I really enjoy those. So if I see somebody do a thing that I've never seen before and can't really figure out, like, that's going to stick with me until I figure it out. And then I either have the satisfaction of figuring it out, which is its own type of satisfaction, or I figure out how to fold that into my creative practice somewhere. I don't always feel the need to roll it into my creative practice, but I definitely feel a need to figure some shit out sometimes.
Yeah, I'll pull on those threads. I'll hear an idea that just doesn't make any sense, or doesn't fit into your worldview, and then just fucking tug at it and follow
Until it makes sense.
Or it doesn't. It just ends up getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Right. So if we follow this line of thinking about where our ideas come from, you start to realize you have these ideas popping into your head. Where the fuck are they coming from?
Yeah, and then it becomes a conversation about the nature of consciousness,
Right.
and then nobody knows shit about that.
Determinism and all this other craziness. And then you start finding connections between that and quantum mechanics and all this other crazy shit, right? And at some point, it doesn't matter anymore. The old
Just is.
the Zen koan about before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that whole realization could be upsetting if you're really invested in being enlightened.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you kind of have to let go and see the humor in that tragedy.
One of the things that really comforts me is that being human is really weird. and it's amazing that we exist at all. So when I step back and look at whatever issue I've got, just the fact that we're here and can do it in the first place is amazing. So of course we have this problem.
Yeah.
So just bittersweet sometimes, but still a luxury.
Seeing an idea that somebody came up with, or painting that somebody did, and just being jealous of it. How fucking ridiculous is that? I was recently looking at some stuff that Ken Curry, and just he did this triptych of faces that was kind of inspired by not Kevin Bacon, Francis Bacon, and it was obvious that it was kind of an homage to some of Francis Bacon's work, but it was totally Ken Curry. And I love both painters, and I was very jealous of what Ken Curry did in homage to Francis Bacon, and then realizing that's such a fucking stupid thing to feel.
You're wasting energy on it.
Yeah,
I in my entire life, like how much energy am I willing to invest? Like, what is the appropriate amount of energy? Where do I waste energy in a day? Like, it's I won't say that's like pragmatic or practical thinking, but it's just like, how do I invest my own very dire resources that I have limited amounts of into my day or my projects or things. Like, I just realized sometimes that there's some bullshit things that I just should not invest energy into. And here I am, smack in the middle of getting heated about it.
Yeah.
I just need to back up and stop.
Just need to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And of course you like have that realization at the peak of being pissed off about whatever it is, because you only going to get those together.
Well, you have two ways out. One is to let it go, one just to go fucking ballistic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's it. And I usually choose to let it go. But if I go ballistic, it's on a canvas trying to do whatever the shit was that pissed me off.
I don't know. I did. See, I'm not finding any joy in painting. I mean, you have your moments, but it's for the most part it's work, right? I mean, you just kind of.
Yeah, I don't enjoy all of it all the time.
You just getting through it. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. You have little moments where you think you're a fucking genius, and then long days when you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
And the days where you feel like you don't know shit are the days that are really long.
Yeah,
it's the worst. You're just looking at something every 10 minutes, going, "I need to do something with that." But then the other 9 minutes, you're just like, "What the hell do I do with that?"
Yeah. What kind of fucking madness do we have that we're compelled to put ourselves through that every day?
I think we're some kind of masochists, because this causes like physical pain sometimes, and like mental anguish, and like self-doubt, and on the occasional hatred. So it's a workout for the body and the mind.
Yeah.
So it's definitely some kind of masochism here.
I find myself during the day thinking about paintings, like at work, like trying to figure them out, and
like workshopping the painting in your head.
In my head, like I'm doing something else. Fucking annoying.
I do that when I go to sleep.
When you go to sleep,
I'll be laying in bed thinking about. So this is when I really like work through and structure out a painting. I'll be laying down to go to bed, to go to sleep. And one of the things that really relaxes me is like thinking through the process of painting a painting.
Well, like acting through it. Well,
not like watching myself third person, but like, hey, I'm going to do this, and it's going to look like this, and then I'm going to, make this line here, and then I'm going to do that with it, and then I'm going to switch colors and do this and this with this color. Like just talking myself through step by step in my head as I rest on my pillow to drift off to sleep. Yeah, I do that a lot. And I don't always paint those things, but, having the familiarity with my tools and my process and thinking about how I would do a thing is calming to me. So, every now and again I'll go to sleep with a picture on my brain that I'll never see again. And that pisses me off.
Then you lose it.
Yeah, because I'm literally laying there about to pass out and actually be asleep, and then poof, like it's gone.
So you visualize your paintings.
Oh, very. Yeah. So it's like half of the time.
It does make sense if you're doing geographical stuff, or not geometric stuff.
Well, so the most bit of planning I normally do for these is doing all the pencil lines. So I call that laying out the bones of it. So I'll draw my lines of symmetry, I'll embellish them, I'll figure out what kind of shapes I want to generally put where, just with pencils. So like I intend to have a large circle here and a small circle there and an array of this size circles. But that's as intentional as it gets. Like after I've laid out just that general idea, it's all free form after that. I intentionally pick my colors, but the formation of those things is totally up, it's in the wind.
So how do you know where to put things and what they should look like?
I don't know what they should look like. I have a feeling about how dense things should be. Like if I look at a certain area of this arrangement and I say, hey, I don't think I can fit anything else in here.
I understand that. Okay.
That's when I stop with that.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing where it's like, oh, this is like 70% full. Like you just look at it and something else could be in there, but what is it?
Yeah, right.
So that's the thing that I'm always kind of aware of when I get closer to a pretty saturated, area. It's
and that's just a compositional decision, right?
So if I stop packing colors and patterns into this area, where's the other place that I need to bring up to that level? Like, density is the easiest way I know to put it, but like adding detail or making more lines,
balance, or whatever. Everybody's got a word for
positive and negative space, that kind of thing. So that is probably the most considered thing, or the third most considered thing in this ordeal, because I've got just the general layout, and then I've got the colors, and then like how much shit do I put on this thing,
right.
And then after that, or in concert with those three aspects, it's just going with the flow and seeing what shapes I make.
Are you just trying to make something that's kind of whole and complete? Is that the driving force?
I mean, complete in the way that I did a thing and I finished it as a task, yes. But complete as in I know what this is supposed to look like when it's done, not often at all. Because I don't know what these things are going to look like when they're done. I just sit down and do them until I feel like they're right.
They're done. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, if I'm done and I don't feel like it's right or done, and I feel like there's something else to be done, I get really edgy about it, because it's the scenario like, if I touch this again, am I gonna fuck it up?
Yeah, I do that. I'll pull shit out that I've done last year and just like dork around with it again. Yeah.
And I know it's time to walk away for a couple of weeks, or like turn it around in the corner somewhere to just like take a pause, and if there's something I need to do to it, I'll figure it out in the future or next time I look at it. But if that's not the case and it sits around for a couple of weeks and I don't touch it, then it's done.
You forget about it.
Well, I mean, not so much forget about it, but if I sit on the idea and look at it and it's sitting around the house and there's nothing else I can like come up with, or nothing else comes to me about that piece, then I won't fight trying to add something to it if I don't know what to add to it. And then I'll just be like, well, I guess I'm done. My brain doesn't want to like toy with this anymore. Yeah. And I'm okay with that, because usually things are pretty far along when I get there.
Yeah, I mean, you have to just let go of it at some point,
Yeah.
Some paintings you just can't save, and some end really easily.
The one I'm working on right now is in that spot where it's like, I know when I finish the things I'm doing right now, it's going to be a really tight spot to like, what's next? And I don't, right now, I'm just trying to get through the step I'm in, and then I'll think about what's next. But the what's next is going to be a real big what's next.
Recently, I've been messing with leaving things out, like leaving empty spaces, like working on canvases, not even priming them, and just building up part of it, and then just leaving the rest as raw canvas. Or leaving sketches on some.
I've been doing a sort of similar thing. I'll take a paint. I usually work like 36 by 24 and smaller to like 3 by 9, like in that like lap sized range. And I do bigger pieces sometimes, but in general it's about that size. Something you can fit in your lap or on a desktop.
Yeah.
And forgot where I was going with that. Great hosting. Where was I going with that? Hang on.
Talking about empty space.
Yes, empty space. So I will take a really wide paint marker and get it really wet, like a lot of paint on the nib, and just like back and forth at a 45, 30 degree angle, and just get what I get as I go across it. So there'll be like little white wedges around the perimeter of the canvas. And honestly, that has pleased my eye a lot more lately than just like a totally black or totally white surface. Like just the little bit of negative space or whatever's left, that doesn't get covered, seems to be way more entertaining than a solid.
That's how I got into the process of starting with chaos. Right? As I like that feeling. It's feels sincere, feels real, feels like a product of nature rather than of planning.
Well, the reason I've come to that language is because like I've looked at my work and been in the middle of thinking about my work and been like, well, shit. What I'm doing right now is adding order to this chaos or adding chaos to this order. And there's no other two ways my work goes. I'm either trying to like add some structure or figure out something that doesn't need so much structure. It's not always obvious on the page, but in my head
Were you aware
really
of this
obvious.
before just now, that that's what you're doing? And,
Oh, I've been aware of that for like 2 years now.
oh, right.
Like, so that's been an idea I've sat with for a minute, and it's been a longer journey trying to figure out how to talk about these things than trying to figure out how my brain works.
Yeah.
Because I know how my brain works. How do I explain it? Kind of.
Yeah.
I know how my ideas work in my head. I'll say that. So, but how do I relay that to people in a way that
It's hard, right?
Yeah, it's been really difficult, and it also doesn't help me that I put a microphone in front of myself and talk about these things to people. So it's been a fun challenge to try and be articulate about these things, and it's totally one I set in front of myself, but so is like every other canvas I put in front of myself. So it's not, I'm not foreign to it. It's just it's one of those things that's a fun thought experiment sometimes.
So do you use that as kind of a North Star when you're working? Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of the time. Okay. If it's one of the geometric pieces, definitely, it's always in my mind about how this looks. And it gets really tricky when I use different size brushes on the same piece. So sometimes I'll have really thick, bold, wide lines, and then a lot of times I'll like have. I use a number 2 watercolor brush a lot. So I'll have like a big fat line, and I'll have a bunch of skinny lines. So it's like, where's the visual happy place with all this, and like, how much structure do I put down with the big lines first, and then how do I flourish those with the skinny lines next?
I like that. I like having that kind of variety of mark making.
I do too, and it's very evident in your work, and it's pretty evident in mine too. And I just really started playing with that the last 6-8 months. A lot of my work before that was really really dialed in on a lot of long, skinny, or just long, skinny lines in general. I mean, lots of round, fluid shapes, but all long, skinny lines, because I would be using 1 or 2 very similar brushes.
Really precise kind of lines and edges. Is that what we're doing?
And then, so a big inspiration of mine, and people have heard me say this a million times, is automotive pinstriping.
Yeah.
So those kind of symmetries and those S curves and those C curves that come to a point and curve back on themselves and overlap themselves, like all that, I love it to death.
I just love auto paint, the surface textures, because you look at the pictures of like the pinstriping and stuff, especially how they used to do it in 50s and 60s. And when you get up close to it, you can see the paint. You see the surface texture is different than the paint. You know, and then you can see kind of the flake that's in the paint, and sometimes you can see the metal underneath the paint.
There's a lot to be done in that medium, and a lot of people have done a lot of stuff, and I just feel like that's one of the areas of culture that I've always gravitated to. Like, my grandpa owned a used car lot / service center when I was growing up, so like, before I knew what a fine perfume smelled like, I knew what gas and brake clean smelled like, you know. And I've lived in that my entire childhood, so I've never been able to get away from gas stations and cars and, you know, all that automotive culture.
I've always loved dashboards, controls, you know, and just it's fascinating to see how that's changed over time, because it's the same interface between a human being and that machine, but it tells you about the time in which it was created, what was important to those people at that time.
Touchscreens right now, sadly. Gross. God. I cuss about touchscreens in cars all the time. So much.
Chrome chunky buttons.
Listen, I think one of the most base experiences of a human being in a world that we live in, technologically advanced and whatnot, you interact with machines with buttons and knobs and wheels, and you turn them and you push them, and you physically manipulate these things, and it feels good until it doesn't. There's some buttons out there that I only want to click once, you know. And then you got all these touch screens, and it's just like boop on the glass, and you hear your finger thud, and that's just
they're so sterile.
The physical engagement of the activity of input is just, it's neutered. Yeah. I don't like it.
But, you know, as an artist, what I like is that the history of the interface with the human and the car, and by seeing the differences in the different eras, it tells you about who those people were,
what their priorities were, what they like to consume,
how they thought about things, and you see this. I think this is my current theory about the role of the artist is to kind of express who we are, for posterity. And it's important because when you're looking at history and you're trying to figure out who those people were and what they valued and what they thought, you look at the art. You don't look at the things that people owned, and you don't look at their bank accounts, and you don't look at the pecking order that they get involved in. You look more at the things that they valued, and you look at the way that the artists interpreted their culture and what was important to them.
One of the things that I like to be mindful of when having this kind of conversation is that art can or is a mirror to society.
Yeah.
And I play with that idea a lot in my head, and I really enjoy looking at stuff with that lens. And I think that interface design, buttons, knobs, screens, all that stuff is insanely reflective of the times in the same way that you speak. You go get into a 56 T-Bird versus, a 2024 Lincoln Navigator, they're going to be very, very different. And rightfully so, because different minds and different times.
Yeah. It's the same kind of interface. It's basically the same machine. How much effort do you want to spend on the different things, right? How much time do you spend on the radio? It tells you a lot about the way that people value that type of communication. The amount of time that you spend on the steering wheel, having all the controls on the steering wheel,
right?
Versus just having a steering wheel like they did, told you what was important to those people.
Well, apparently keeping your hands on the steering wheel is way more important now, because there are way more buttons on steering wheels now than there ever has been.
Nobody gave a shit about safety back then.
Until Ralph Nader, and he said, "Y'all bitches wear your seatbelts." He got that shit in Congress. Yeah. He did.
You did, yeah.
He did. That's why everything after 1970 has a 3-point harness in your road car. In 1969, he put that in Congress. Yep.
Yeah. The whole Green Party was built by Ralph Nader and his seatbelts.
Fucking seatbelts.
Which is great. That's a wonderful thing to champion, and it saved a lot of lives.
Still does every day. Yeah. That wasn't a very creative decision, though. Everybody hated it. They're like, no, we have lap belts. That's enough. Of course we want to fly out the windshields of our cars as they crumple in around us.
You still wear them. People still wear them. And, you just get used to it. Every time they have some kind of new piece of technology that they mandate, you'll have people fighting it just because it's mandated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were talking about one of those kind of things in the news recently was speed governors on cars.
Oh, yeah.
And I get it. People driving fast kill people. It's usually themselves, which is appropriate. But no way in hell do I want to ever buy a 911 that I can only drive at 100 miles an hour, because California said it needs to have a governor.
Yeah. There is some car that you can only, I think it might be the 911. Or was it that fucking Bugatti, where it'll let you go over the governor if you're at a track?
Oh yeah, there are a couple cars that have like geo-based stuff like that. That's for safety reasons. That's a 230 mile per hour car. It should probably be let loose in certain places. That's like having the red key and the black key for your Dodge Charger. Right. Like you give the valet the black key because that's the normal one.
I'm not driving around 120, 150 miles an hour.
No.
I would still be against the governor.
Exactly. I don't know if I bought a thing because it could do a thing and then there was hardware on the thing that told me I couldn't do the thing, I'd be a little upset.
Yeah. Well, kind of. People want to mitigate risk these days, or force others to mitigate risk.
That's it. Yeah. But I understand all the logic and I empathize, so I can't critique it too much. I totally understand. But when you tell me my fast car can only go so fast, what the hell?
You just take it like a challenge.
Well, that way the challenge these days are all beep boops and wires and whatnot. Yeah. I can tune a carburetor.
Oh, I love that. I was just joking with my wife. You go to the market now, and the cars have a little sensor where they'll apply a brake to one of the wheels and you take it. I bet you that I can sniff that signal and make a little device so that we're in the grocery store, I can just lock everybody's cards.
You
I think
probably
that'd be
could.
hilarious. That'd be so fucking funny.
It'd be that damn clipper device everybody's uppity about these days.
Oh, the flippers, yeah.
Yeah, they're causing a lot of trouble. Apparently.
Are they?
Oh, apparently people are using them for all kinds of nefarious things.
Yeah, I bet you can stop somebody's car, open the doors, do shit like that.
Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about digital security stuff like that, Bluetooth is a very permeable way to transmit information. It seems a lot of people have been getting into cars via Bluetooth security stuff.
Oh, that's really weird that they would allow access to kind of critical.
Well, you can get into the infotainment system via that, and then they just kind of leapfrog other places inside the ECU.
Yeah, you'd think they would isolate the different subsystems.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to be said about automotive engineering these days, apparently. That's Bluetooth is really cool for the speaker at home. I don't want it in my car. There's a lot of stuff I don't want in my car. I yearn for a day of mechanically simple things, and it is long past.
I just want a car where there's enough room in the engine bay that you can fucking get to the bolts you need to get to.
Yeah, every time. And no, I don't want to take the cab off my truck to change the transmission. No, I don't. I know that there are trucks out there nowadays that you have to do that, and it's ridiculous. Yeah. There's no more mechanically simple things unless you live in Japan, and then they have all kinds of a passion for that.
What for simplicity in that area?
Yeah, Japanese vehicles, the K trucks and K vehicles, K vans, all those things, K platforms. The micro vehicles are all super simple. They're tiny, but they're super simple, and I love them.
There's a Japanese engineering principle that they use to make everything simpler. Mm-hmm. Make things a little bit simpler, a little bit more reliable.
Reduce the part count. That's always a good place to start. If there's less things can break. And I like that philosophy a lot. Simple is always good in my book, even though I find myself making terribly complicated things.
Well, they're only
they're simple to me because I'm the one making them. But then you look at it on a wall 6 months later, and you're like, dear God.
Yeah. So I have that experience where I'm making stuff, and it's just I'm not thinking about it too much, like starting with chaos like that, and just kind of throwing stuff on there.
Do you have some order to add to this, or are you just right here, right now with this piece?
That's just the beginning, right? So there's a process, and that's just... I'm not even done adding the chaos. I think
oh, okay. So we're still working on the chaos.
Yeah, it'll start to pull together at some point. But one of the things that people say quite a lot is they like the paintings because there's a lot to look at. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things to look at, and a lot of little symbols and stuff that end up in the piece.
Yeah. And
they tend to, from that perspective, tend to be really complicated, right? A lot of textures and a lot of lines and a lot of colors and things like newspaper and stuff like that to get into. But I find them very simple, and I'm trying to make them simpler, so there's less to look at like that. There's less to get lost in, because I find that distracting. You know, I don't like when people come in and they're reading
the stuff in the text.
Right.
You're like, that's not the point.
I've been working on just like I'm gonna start printing out just Greek.
Yeah, so you can't sit there and read it.
Yeah, so there's nothing to read. But then you have to worry about people taking that wrongly. So part of the guiding concept for me is trying to simplify things, get people out of their, just out of it and just see it as a painting rather than a puzzle or a little toy. And it's hard to do. It's hard to and it's maybe just kind of a losing battle to try to kind of control the way people receive this stuff. And
yeah, because if you're shooting for as simple as possible, you got to hit the lowest common denominator. Sometimes that's pretty low.
Yeah.
So I don't... How often do you have... This is a tangent to that. How often do you have people just look at you and be like, I don't understand this at all?
All the time. It's always either people don't get it or they do. And it seems like it's a pretty hard line. I've never been able to bring somebody over. you know.
And you've given them the whole ladder up the wall.
Yeah, talking to them, like, you know, trying to explain things, letting them ask questions, taking them through a piece and explaining what this is there for, why that's there for. And I've never been able to bring somebody over to my side and you know.
Not one, for real.
Yeah, it's just fucking... there's a lot... People come to art with a lot of their own preconceptions, right? There's a lot of people, a huge portion of people in the art world that think art is about beauty.
Yeah.
And you're out there to make really beautiful things that someone wants to hang in their home. And the more money they pay for it, the more beautiful it must be.
The money part. Yeah, if it's expensive, goddamn, it's gorgeous. Yes.
That's so fucking stupid. I mean, that was... because that idea that art is beauty is something that's, you know... Where'd that come out of the Renaissance?
Probably.
Yeah. And they've forgotten all of the art that's happened after that. It doesn't matter to them. Like, for some reason, it's still about how beautiful something is, and if you're going to paint something, it must be an homage to the beauty of whatever the subject is.
Right, it must capture the idea of the thing perfectly.
And you're never going to bring somebody over that, you know, drag them through art history and have them see, you know, artwork the way it is now. They're just kind of stuck on that. And then you get people that are at various levels in there. And with my work, it's they get it or they don't, and I don't know why. I mean, I don't know what I can say to, or what I can do to kind of let them see things the way that I see them.
Have you spent a lot of time thinking about that?
I have, because part of arguing with myself about whether or not art is supposed to inspire people to see these ideas, right? I mean, that painting with the sinking ship. I mean, is the purpose of that to get somebody to look at it and, you know, light goes off and says, "Oh, that's what it's about. I understand now." Are we just trying to trick people into that? Because you can just tell them.
Right. Yeah, you can. You can just blatantly be like, "Hey, dude, this." But is that as enjoyable as being like, "Look at this picture.
Yeah,
I worked on this picture."
Is it supposed to be enjoyable? I mean, what the fuck?
Well, in my life experience, I've often enjoyed being the guy that says the thing people don't want to hear. And I think that also translates into the pieces of art that I make that actually have a message.
Yeah.
Because the things that I say when I have things to actually say with the pictures that I make are never really nice. They have lots of empathy about them, but the points I make generally upset people.
Yeah.
Like, you know, abortion is healthcare. Like, some people get really mad about that. Like, I don't want women to die just because they're somehow pregnant and it goes wrong or whatever the circumstance is. Like, that sounds terrible to me. And somebody's going to sit here and have the opposite viewpoint and then just think I'm terrible for representing my side of the issue with this painting I made. Get the fuck out. Like, I'm not trying to be controversial. It just... other people think the shit is.
Well, they have to see this stuff. I mean, they have to. One of the things that makes some of my work and some of your work controversial is we're forcing people to see these uncomfortable things and to think about them.
Yeah.
And think about them in the context of it being art, being something worth thinking about.
Oh, the art twist to that is something that I think catches people on a whole different level, because not only is this idea like confrontational or inflammatory to their worldview, but this is supposed to be somehow like highbrow or classy or poignant or beautiful or like whatever adjective you want to put to something you associate as art. And then it's presented to them in this format where it's just like, oh, this is the idea you're supposed to be consuming because this is on display. And then they all of a sudden just like feel attacked in the depth of their being. I'm not mad about that, but you're the one upset. Like I thank you for coming to look at my art. I'm sorry you left in such a piss poor mood. You know, like, you didn't have to do this.
Yeah, you brought this on yourself.
By lacking empathy and, you know, not being genuine to other people's human experience. So that's on you, Hoss.
So I know my work is, you know, I can't think of any of it that doesn't really deal with kind of uncomfortable ideas, and it's all a little bit dark, and it's just my view on about the culture and how it's affected me in my life, and I'm not sure whether that's good or bad, but it does affect whether people like it or not.
Well, I mean, what is just is, like, a good or bad is put onto it, you know.
Yeah.
It's not. It's just the product of your experience.
So I had a woman come out. I have some stuff over at Art Market, and I had a woman come in there that liked the paintings, and one of the paintings, I think I have a picture of it here. She wanted to talk about this because she loved the piece, because it made her feel anxious and had a. How'd she put that? It made her feel anxious and like something bad was going to happen.
I mean, I can understand how someone would feel a bit of some unease looking at this.
The news and all that stuff. But, and that, you know, that's intentional, I think. You know, as I'm working through, those are the emotions and the ideas and things that I'm following.
Mickey Mouse ears.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been doing like cartoon characters here now.
So, when was the last time you drew an actual person's face? Like an actual still life, like a face.
Oh, man.
Because you have implied face and face shapes and face outlines and parts of faces. But like, out of my own curiosity, when was the last time you drew a face? A whole face?
Long time. I've been systematically breaking them up.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are very deconstructed.
Yeah.
Anatomy-wise and idealistically.
Yeah, so I'm doing that on purpose, but I don't know when I've actually tried to depict somebody. I think it would be fun to try to do a portrait of somebody now.
I would love to see how that would happen.
Yeah. But it's just, I don't know. I feel like I had to decide that it was just going to be about the work, you know, and trying to struggle with trying to show things and considering how people feel about them and what they get out of them and all that stuff. It's just way too much, you know, and especially trying to make money at it. So we all, as artists, want to be able to make a living at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be great to just have your work sell for so much that you don't even have to worry about the money anymore. But that's not going to fall out of the sky. You have to work towards it.
Yeah, you have to get.
And I don't want to do that.
There's a lot to be done before that happens.
It's about the money or it's about the work. And it has to be about the work.
First.
Yeah.
The money may come, or it may not.
Who fucking cares? Yeah, I don't know. What am I going to do with more money?
Do you ever sit down and be like, oh, this piece, I'm going to make this piece to sell this piece? Because I sure as fuck don't.
No.
No.
I used to have a gallery that would sell work, and this was years ago, and I wasn't making stuff fast enough. Everything that I was making, they were selling.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it wasn't selling for great amounts of money, but everything I did was selling. It was at the point that I could have just been an artist. So at that point, I was working part-time. I was working maybe 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week, and painting the rest of the time. And everything was selling, and I found myself making things to sell.
Yeah.
Afraid to do something.
Because there was that vacuum that was present?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, you know, I don't want to do something a little bit, you know, too experimental. I don't want to stray too far because this stuff is selling now, so I'm going to keep making more of this stuff. And it's the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah, I've never had that problem. I never had that problem. I mean, I'll get tied into a style or a specific look for a little bit, and then I'll work in that vein and branch off and do something else. But the only vacuum I've ever felt that I need to feel is just like that I haven't made something this week and I need to paint because I need to paint.
Yeah.
And I'm way more comfortable with that than I am somebody calling me and be like, hey, there's empty wall space, blah, 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 which I've had those phone calls too, but it's not the same type of drive. You know, those two statements are very different statements, even though the outcome is very similar. Hey, make stuff. But it's not. The intention from the get-go is very different.
You ever find people envious that you're creative, that you have, that you can do this stuff? That you can?
Yeah, but it's also the same people who are really successful at different aspects of their life that aren't like necessarily creative. My sister, she was always really talented with dance, so she could move really, really well. She did ballet, she did jazz dance, stuff like that. Really talented dancer. she couldn't sit down and draw a stick figure to save her life. So I would hear a lot that, oh, you know, that skipped me, or I wish I had those genes, or whatever. I got that a lot from her growing up. And I've had people go, oh, gee, golly, I don't know how you do this thing. It's just blah, blah, blah. I wish I could do something like that. And it's not that I hear that a lot, but it's definitely, I feel like most creative people hear that. And I just tell people that I've practiced at it. and I don't mean that flippantly, but it's a thing that I've devoted time, energy, and intention to, and that thing on the wall is the product of the last 15 years of me having a creative practice. Not that I've practiced that thing for 15 years, but I've done 100 other things that have led me to be able to do this, and that's accessible to just about everybody.
Yeah, so, I think it can be taught and it can be learned, and you just have to prioritize doing that.
Well, like, how do you explain to someone how to be creative, though? Like, you just fucking can't. Like, it's an inherent part of a person's being, and we all have it. It's just some people are more exercised at using that, you know, muscle as others. And I can tell people how I am creative all day because I know me best. Mm-hmm. But I can't tell anybody how they can be creative. I can tell them how I do it or the tools that I have, and if they can find...
Well, I think it's kind of like you can't. It's hard to explain painting, but I think you can teach somebody to paint. I think you could put them in a situation where they can do it.
You can definitely teach somebody to paint, but how do you teach them what they want to paint? Like, I threw my arms up. I don't know how I would relay to a person what needs to come out of their brain. Like, I just don't. And that's one of the things that I've settled with doing my guided paint sessions that I do. It's like, I'm not going to hold anybody to a super rigid idea like yours needs to look exactly like mine when you're done, because nobody's going to be able to do that, and I can't paint the same painting twice. So why am I going to hold somebody to the standard that I'm trying to set here? So I'm not.
One thing that I've learned is there are archetypes for things in that we share just because of our biology.
Yeah, so for sure.
I saw this in children's art, so I started researching it a bit. Where children across cultures and across time will draw humans pretty much the same way in different phases of their development. Mm-hmm. And there's no reason for that other than that's
just how your brain works.
That's how your brain works. Yeah. That's the expression of what a person looks like. And even as an adult, you look at children's work, and that's a person. Mm-hmm. That weird little tadpole stick person. Mm-hmm. You know, there's no mistaking it. And I remember seeing a drawing you ever that Monsters, Inc.? There's that big fuzzy kind of turquoise character. Yeah. And seeing a drawing that a kid about 6 years old did of that, and it was a drawing of her riding on the back of that, that monster, and it was just a big squiggle, just a big ball of scribbles in that aqua color, and a little stick figure riding on his back, and immediately you knew what it is, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to simplify things to that point.
Oh, you're trying to get back to that childlike.
Not get back. It's easy to do that, right?
Right.
But I'm trying to rediscover those archetypes.
Well, is that? Do you have any sort of associated like sense of awe with that, or wonder, or freedom?
Well,
or do you just enjoy the simplicity of that much?
I find it an amazing magic trick. Like it's an awesome trick to be able to do stuff like that. Us being able to create these weird little illusions that make people think, it's a fucking crazy thing to do.
Yes, it is.
So there's this the seagull experiment where there's this species of gull that the mother has a red spot on her beak, and the chicks will focus on that red spot, and they identify that red spot with them being fed. Mm-hmm. Or they had an experiment where they were raising these seagull chicks, and in order to get them to feed, they had a hand puppet that looked like a seagull that had a beak and everything, and it had a little red spot on it. And when the chicks saw the red spot, they would open their mouths as if they're getting fed, and so they started deconstructing the mother, the puppet,
to see the elements.
Yeah, what was the root of what in the chick's brain that meant a mother was going to feed him, and they got it down to a popsicle stick with a little red dot on the end of it, and they would react
all the way down.
Yeah, react as if that was the mother.
So,
and then, well, they went a step further, and they turned into a popsicle stick with 3 red lines on it. And the chicks got super excited, like way more excited.
Oh, because 3 of them.
In the chick's brain, 3 red lines was more of a mother than a full seagull actual mother. Right. You know, that was the representation in the chick's brain of a mother.
So they've taken that and boiled it down to 3 red lines.
Yeah.
So that's the same. So taking this simple input and getting this fully formed what's the word? Reinforcement. The fully formed, like, positive reinforcement of this whole idea. Like, I'm gonna get fed. I see this thing that, but these essentially it's the most basic level. So that's the aqua scribble.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 3 red lines is now the aqua scribble in this conversation. Yeah. And using that simple thing to convey this fully formed idea of a fully fleshed out on TV in movies character is what you're trying to get at.
It's a brain hack.
Yeah.
Yeah. There've been a number of studies like this about art. So there's another study where they were giving people brain scans while they're looking at different pieces of art. Looking at, you know, Picasso used to do a lot of these figures that the face was in profile and it was, you know, face on at the same time. And when they found that there are 2 different parts of the brain that react to a face in profile and a face where you can see both eyes. And when you look at a Picasso, it excites both areas of the brain. It kind of hyper excites.
Yeah, because they're both there.
Yeah. Huh. And so part of what we're doing is finding those things.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
for sure.
using those to kind of convey ideas and to excite people and draw them into these images.
I would love to see an fMRI of someone's brain looking at my artwork. Now that might be a little selfish, maybe a little grandiose, but I would love that.
I wonder if we can get some lab time.
I know some people. Let me call my doctor friends. Hey man, I gotta see this. So I reached out to you via the internet, someone I've never met before. I pose a lot of questions to the ether, and a lot of the times people say yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes if I call some more of my like adjacent friends, be like, "Hey, I got an art project, and you're the only person that can help me," and they're like, "Why the fuck? Why am I involved here?" And then I'll lay it on them, and they're like, "Oh, I see why I have to be this person now."
I think that would be an interesting project if we can scientifically create an ultimate work of art.
Yeah. If we can we must quantify it. I'll take notes. Can't do science work without taking notes.
Well, let's say we crack that problem and we figure out how to create kind of the world's most interesting piece of art by using these brain hacks. Where does that leave us?
Oh, we got a huge doctor bill.
Bill?
That's what we have to pay for the machine time. Yeah, we got a doctor bill.
And then you're back where you started. Well, so what? Who cares?
Well, yes, who cares? But also, the intellectual gymnastics that it took to create that, I would feel really accomplished in and proud of.
Yeah.
Because you fucking dove in that rabbit hole and found the bottom. And and the intellectual gymnastics of doing those kind of things, I really enjoy. Like figuring stuff out that made me jealous, like that kind of thing. Yeah, hell yeah, I like figuring that stuff out. I feel good about it. I won't say it drives me to do a ton of stuff, but I never feel shameful about the time and energy I put into figuring shit out.
Yeah, so I really love those kinds of adventures.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm always at the end of it, I just need to get more time in the studio, and I just need to make my work, and you know.
Yeah. It's like, well, I'm gonna go paint something now.
Yeah.
Discovered the secret of the universe. Let's go paint. Like that would be me too. I'm not gonna lie. Did some profound thing. Where's my brushes? Like that's 100%. I would do that.
And get up in the morning, go to work, eat lunch. You know, that's what it all comes down to.
Yeah, like your life would fundamentally change all the way around and none at all at the same time, and that's the duality you just have to live with, or else you're gonna go crazy trying to fight it.
And in the meantime, we're still we have to do something great before we can experience that again.
Yeah. I don't know. I try not to like be super conscious about that my achievements or what I've done or how many art shows I've done. Like I try not to get too uppity about it. But there are some things I've done. I'm just like, hell yeah, that was cool. Yeah. And that's about as excited as I get about it after the fact. Like I'll be super hyped about something in the moment, but you know, in retrospect, I'm just like, I'm happy I did that. That was really cool.
Yeah, there's definitely those moments of like just joy and things.
Well, I mean, some of the first times I ever involved a laser into my artwork was pretty cool. A laser, yeah. I've got friends that do live production stuff, lighting, sound, and this is another one of those scenarios where I placed a phone call to somebody out in the ether, like, "Hey, brother, I need your help. I got this idea," and shot a laser at a substrate that was covered in different glow-in-the-dark pigments, and the laser was a full spectrum laser, full spectrum, but all the colors in the visible spectrum. Okay. And those different colors of lasers shot at the different colored pigments of glow pigment on this board. It made a very wonderfully colorful collage that traced itself around the board as the laser moved. So as the laser moved, it was shifting through the color wheel, and as the different colors from the laser were hitting the different colors of glow pigment, it was just, morphing and fluidly changing between all the different colors. And that was really nice.
So why are you painting and not doing computer generated art?
I do. Do? Yeah, I make digital work. That's more my illustration stuff. Here comes the real edgy shit. I use AI in some of my artwork, and I know that's a really controversial statement, but it's a tool, and I'm going to use it. I don't get really uppity about the whole. Obviously, there's some ethical gray areas in this whole topic. I'm not going to act like they don't exist. But as a consumer, this is available to me. I'm going to use it, and it's a very powerful tool. And I feel like if people didn't use really capable tools, they're foolish. So I'm going to learn how to use this really capable tool.
Yeah, it's something that's out in the world, and there's no reason not to use it.
You can't fight it now. It's already out. Cat's out of the bag.
So one of the things about AI, I enjoyed it much more last year when it wasn't very good.
Oh, it's still not great.
I know.
People are better at using it now.
I had some here, but I love the way it used to distort faces and it would make faces out of things that weren't intended to be faces.
Yeah, like the Google Dream thing that made everything into dogs and frogs and cats and stuff. There's still a lot of that out there, and AIs are getting really, really good, but they're also still not great. So every now and again you'll get that finger or a hand with 7 fingers or some third eyeball. It still happens.
You spend any time fucking with GPT? And
I do. I straight up just use Midjourney with my own written prompts. But if I need something a bit more formulaic and consistent across multiple entries, I'll use ChatGPT to construct a prompt that I then feed into Midjourney.
So you're using AI as a tool to get something out of it, right?
And then I manipulate further whatever I get from it. So it's not just like I type in the thing, it renders an image, there it is. No, I'm using it to make assets. I'm not using it to make finished projects or whatever. It's not an item.
I'm curious about them in themselves. I think it's a little scary, and it's a little telling about how closely ChatGPT can mimic a conversation, a person in a conversation, and it's creepy only because that it thinks differently than a human being does.
But it spits out a lot really similar.
Yeah, and so it's just based on probabilities of kind of the next phrase or the next word in a string of words. So where a sentence that ChatGPT starts, it doesn't know where it's going to end up. Yeah. Kind of like how our process of painting is where you start, you don't know where you end up.
Hell, this whole conversation. if we're gonna be really analytical about it, yeah. And
it's crazy to me that it can make that much sense when there's no preconceived idea in its head anywhere. It's starting with a probability of what's the next word or phrase that's going to come out of whatever prompt you give it, and it just keeps there's a waterfall of code that comes that finishes out that thought. And it sounds so much like a human being.
Well, people made it.
Yeah.
So that's...
What's the difference? I mean, imagine in a few years you're going to have something that can speak like a human being, and you're not going to be able to tell the difference.
Mm-hmm. I think this is one of those scenarios where perhaps we don't know what would be better, so we just make it in the image of ourselves in some way. It's like, oh, well, we're comfortable with this level of interaction in this style of language. Mm-hmm. We type things into a keyboard and then something spits words back out at us, So the bandwidth and the way it communicates is similar to between two people. When it goes beyond that, it's going to get really wild.
I think when it stops making sense.
yeah.
Then you really have to
in some way,
out.
yeah.
It's probably thinking.
That's when Skynet turns on and everything's terrible.
Well, it makes me think about kind of who we are. Like I was saying before, we're all just kind of a product of biology and things are out of control. And I think at the heart of it, I'm a determinist when it comes to, the world and things like that. So, everything, you have no control over kind of who you are and your life and what's going to happen to you. And
no guardrails?
No, it's just free will can be kind of an illusion. But then at the same time, you can't live that way. But maybe that's who we are. We're Chat GPT. It's just a bunch
infinite possibilities within this very specific context.
Yeah, I don't know. It makes me wonder, because there's a lot of... We're talking about... I think when we were talking about seagulls, it started with these moments that we have that make you kind of... These moments of clarity that you have. And that was one of them for me, is years and years ago, going down that thought path of, who are you, and how much control do you have over your life? Who is popping these fucking ideas into your head?
Control is a topic that I think on a lot as just a person. What amount of control do I have over some topic? Where is that control? Like, how do I influence this topic? How does this topic reflect and influence me? That thought experiment is like constantly ongoing in my head, and I apply it to most things in my life. Like, what can I truly control? It's not a lot. Yeah. it's a very, very short list of things in the grand scheme of things.
So do you have something that helps you cope with that? Help with making decisions and not having control over some things and not others?
That's a great question, because I have no good answer for it. I am very comfortable accepting things as they are, and I'm also very comfortable accepting when I don't have control over things that may or may not be huge influences in my life. Like, I just understand this is a thing, and I can either control it to some degree or I cannot, and I've become really okay with that really fast. That's part of learning where the control is or isn't. Like, is this a sharp, thin line? Does it bleed? Is it some kind of gradient in my influence? Like, it's one of those things where you just have to be mindful of where and how much, I guess, because I don't get too bent out of shape about the things I can't control, because if shit spirals out of control one day, I'm still going to go home and try to get a good night's sleep. Like, at the very basis of this whole experience, the things I can control are the things directly around me that are good for me. Like my routine, who I talk to, how I interact with those people. So those are the things I control and will invest in. Like, I can't really do a whole lot about, tax code or federal governance or, stuff like that. So I don't stay awake at night worrying or thinking about those things. That's wasted energy to me. Like, I have very limited resources, and I need to use them as appropriate as possible. Yeah, really. It's just, I don't invest a lot in things I can't control. So, you know, I don't worry about a lot of things I can't control.
I'm having trouble with that type of stuff. So I'll go off on some kind of follow some kind of idea, like we're talking about determinism, which has been bothering me recently, and try to live according to a philosophy. Try to develop a philosophy that allows me to navigate a world that's deterministic, and realizing you can't fucking do that. You got no control.
It's harder than it sounds.
Yeah. And then that leads me to think, well, then why the fuck worry about it?
Yeah.
Let go of it. But then you can't completely. So you have to live a life where, you're just coping.
Yeah, you have to gain, I don't know if it's comfort or familiarity, but you have to be aware of the things that poke at you.
Yeah.
You really do. And I don't know if I actively practice this or not in the way that it sounds like it's coming out of my mouth. But being mindful of these things is a really big part of being able to like deal with them. Like if you know that thing bothers you versus just randomly being irritated and not knowing why, one of those is way easier to handle than the other. And I don't know, I guess fortunately in this case, I've had a life experience that is pretty rich with a lot of positive and a lot of negative. And it's taught me how to handle both ends of that spectrum in this way. So that's neither good nor bad, it's just what is, and I have to deal with that in a way that is helpful for me. So if that means some shit happens and I act like it didn't and I go to bed, so be it. I know I'm going to have to deal with that at some point. So got to. You can't not.
Yeah, I've been comfortable just one of the ways that I cope is doing that, just letting shit go. I don't give just not giving a fuck.
And that practice is not black and white.
No,
it's
isn't.
not like,
It's
okay,
hard.
I'm done caring about this shit now. It's never going to bother me again.
Yeah.
But you have an ease with this idea that this is something that doesn't jive with you in a way that works.
Yeah.
So you just have to be like, hey, this doesn't work for me. I know it exists, but...
And
then just pack it up,
A lot of that is dealing with parts of yourself that you don't like. So... I've known a lot of really shitty people in my time.
We all have that luxury somehow.
And I know there are parts of me that are like that as well. I know there's some really nasty parts of myself. And you can try to get rid of them, but you're always going to have, things about yourself that you're not particularly nice. And learning to accept that, especially when you do something that you shouldn't have done.
Yep.
And learning to accept that you did that. And sometimes you don't want to take responsibility for it, and still being able to accept that you did that. That's who you are.
Yeah,
is hard.
Yeah.
Because you want to see yourself as a good person, but sometimes you're not, and that's totally normal.
Like, that line of being a good person is more like a sine wave sometimes, and I really think the human experience is way more gray than it is black and white. So anytime something in my life falls in that gray area, I really try not to beat myself up about it, whether it's my fault or not. It's just a thing that is. I got to deal with it. So you got to deal with it in a way that works great for you.
If we're going to take something positive away from this, it makes you a lot more understanding of other people and a lot more accepting of the bullshit that they put you through sometimes.
Yeah, one of those exact examples, like, once I started being really introspective about how I deal with being a person as a young adult, back when I was a young adult, it's like, hey man, you're this guy, you got to figure out how to be this guy. And then you encounter people in public that are a little cross or off in some way or something. And one of the ways I rationalize this to myself is like, oh, they're just grown-up babies too. Like, we all have those things about ourselves that we can't control that affect us every day. Mm-hmm. And whatever those are, sometimes they're closer to the surface than others. And some people wear it on their sleeve, and it tints every word that comes out of their mouth.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to realize that they're a damaged person, and you're a damaged person too. And you got to, you don't have to love them, but you got to tolerate them. And try not to, you don't go out of their way to ruin their day, but, you both got to get through it.
Yeah, you both have to get through it, and it's, you can be understanding about it without having to
Yeah, you
be
can
a victim of
empathize.
it.
Yeah, you can empathize without like being a victim of or coddling that person for whatever reason. It's just finding out where that balance is.
Yeah.
Being human's really weird. Yeah.
Yes, it's complicated.
Yeah, so that's like that's when I come back to that. It's like being human's really weird. It's hard for everybody. It's easy for no one. Being human's really weird. So like that is a thing I say to myself like every day. And you'll have a weird interaction with somebody in public and you're like, hey, being human's really weird. So it's just one of those things, man. It comforts me knowing that I'm weird. I make weird stuff. I hang out with weird people. And this all has a positive connotation in my life. But like
weirdness is a good thing.
Well, I seek weird. God, I look for it. Because you and I both know we can look around outside the front door of this building we're in right now and see all kinds of normal, boring shit. And is that okay? Totally. But do we have the power to make weird, cool shit? Yes.
Yes.
That's why I choose to. Like, I can, I will. Everything out there is boring.
Yeah, but you can't make the weird, crazy shit unless there's a boring world to put it in.
Exactly. That is the duality and the necessity of like the normal stuff in society. Because if we created the things we create in a vacuum, then it would be useless. Yeah. Like there would be no frame of reference or context for it. It would just be like, oh, that stuff over there,
So what are you challenged by in making this weird stuff? Like in making this art, what are you fighting with the most?
All right, well, you also be prepared to answer that because I like that question a lot. I really do. Normally, the way I ask that is like, where are you pushing your boundaries? Right. So, what am I fighting against to make the weirdest stuff? The ever-increasing prevalence of boring stuff. Like, oh my God, I cannot tell you how many things I look out my door or travel through my day and see and be like, why isn't this cooler than it is? Like, I don't see... Some being crawled out of the ocean one day and now we're here and we have to pay fucking taxes? Get out. No. There are a million ways any one thing could have happened. Why couldn't it have happened in a better, cooler, different way? And not that what it is bad, but recognizing that it could be different and that could be better is an ever-present theme in how I go through my life. Like, I am satisfied with a lot of what is, but I also realize that some of what is really sucks and could be a lot cooler in some way. And I think some of the most practical or engaging answers to whatever questions are often like the weird answers or the ones that don't seem the most practical. Like, I think H.R. Geiger is some of the coolest shit on the planet, and I wish more stuff looked like that, but not a whole lot looks like that. And that whole ethos of artistic creation is amazing. Like, you take this and that and mash it together, and it makes its own unique, beautiful thing. He did whole buildings, like whole art
cities
thing, big, grand things, and the idea would just be that those are the normal things. And that's really cool to me, to just have the weird things be the normal things. Because there's just too much normal things that, the traditional normal in the sense of this conversation, like brown buildings. Like,
why is every car a station wagon nowadays?
I love station wagons. I love station wagons. They're the best. Long roof, all-wheel drive, gimme. But, like 5/1 residential commercial housing on the strip right now. Like, get out of here, dude. It all looks the same. Nobody asked for that. Like, I'm tired of seeing stuff like that. Can we paint one of those purple? Like, I would be really happy if one of those was painted purple, because that all by itself would be such a departure from the normal color palette for one of these buildings. Like, that's a good starting point for me. Let's paint one of these ugly ass buildings purple.
I'd love it if they just stopped trying to look interesting. If they
trying so hard. Yeah, if people just made cool stuff that was cool to them instead of, I think architecture is one of the things nowadays that is more thought of on the front end of how's this going to look, what are people going to think about this, instead of like the rogue architects from back in the day, where they're just like, we're going to make a building that looks like this come hell or high water, and it's going to be fucking awesome. I wish more people had that attitude, but the world doesn't really reward that attitude the same way it used to.
No, it doesn't. The public art is, I think they start with a position of, we don't want anybody to be offended.
Yeah, that's not the place. That's not the place.
So we're going to do something that doesn't say anything, so that we're sure that nobody will take offense with it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a terrible thing to leave the future.
Yeah, like, this is sterile. Have it. No thanks. So turn this back around. Where are you pushing things?
I've been thinking about this because my work has changed so much over the past few years. What the fuck am I doing? Why do I think it's getting better? Because there's no scientific objective measure for what I'm doing and where I'm trying to go with it. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find that. I'm trying to find, well, why am I doing these things? I've found a process that I like. Mm-hmm. I'm going through that process, and my process of making artwork has been more and more letting go of trying to unlearn the things that I've learned, letting go of the planning, letting go of the techniques, trying to make things that are more naive looking. I find myself making hands that look less and less like hands, and liking them more and more. And just there's some reason that I'm doing this, and I don't know why. The work even is getting where it's becoming more about the effect of American culture on an individual, like what America and my experience with America, what that's done to me.
Mickey Mouse ears.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse ears.
He handed me a postcard with Our America on it, and like there are very easy to pick out cultural nods in this image. And the first one I looked at you when you handed me this, I said Mickey Mouse ears. So as being a Western civilization conditioned person, most people are going to look at two giant round things on the top of somebody's head and think about Mickey Mouse ears.
Yeah, they're just circles.
That's an innately American idea to have, unless you're in China, because then Disney's huge, just no Winnie the Pooh.
And you'll see a lot of my paintings that have Popeye in them, or Bugs Bunny, and just these kind of cultural icons, media icons.
Because those are distinctly American pop culture things.
That's I don't know. So I have a painting that's it's a kind of a father and son thing, and the father is just kind of a rigid person. Their face is just kind of blown up, and there's a drawing of Popeye on top of him. So this is a representation of just kind of really anxious, kind of broken Popeye human being.
I mean, Popeye was a product of a time where a lot of dudes carried themselves like that.
And then the child is it's just a boy with a T-shirt that has dollar signs on it, and their face is kind of this contorted skull, and he's holding a noose that's around his own neck, and just kind of an expression of modern culture, the kind of this media culture that we find ourselves in. And Popeye is there just kind of holding onto his son with a lot of tension, not knowing what can Popeye's broken in himself. And so the Popeye was used because of who he is in our culture. He's this strong kind of underdog character.
Very much so.
And that's what makes the piece, is because Popeye is this strong kind of underdog American character. And in this painting, he's helpless to control his own son and his own self. His future is out of his control. He's just the victim of all of this. And these cultural icons are really easy to use like that. So, like, you have Bugs Bunny, and I have him in a couple of paintings.
I just noticed there was a gun in that painting.
And he's just kind of a trickster, right? And he's always, that's his character. And so he gets used like that in my paintings. I have another painting where there's a Bugs Bunny type character who's kind of the U.S. government, and he's sending these soldiers out to war. And So I think they make it in that.
There's context for that. There's historical context for Bugs Bunny and warplanes. Like, it exists.
So that finds itself into my work, not because I planned it that way, but because I'm just a product of the culture, and so that stuff comes out of me.
Well, I mean, if you tried for it to not, you would be fighting it really hard.
So you just let go and accept that. But I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck I'm doing, and I hope I'm getting closer and not farther away. And I don't know.
Yeah, because there's no, like you said, there's no quantifiable way to measure this. It all comes down to feel.
Yeah, and I really like talking to other artists like you about this stuff, because you're going to know better than me whether I'm on the right track or not.
Well, it's one of those things where like you hold up, somebody else has to hold the mirror, because you can't hold the mirror and see what you need to see.
Yeah. So, like, we've talked about a lot of stuff that's just me in my head, that I don't know no one else to talk to about that stuff. And because we're just talking about it, it comes out, and you have a lot of the same ideas that I have, and you're reinforcing my...
For better or for worse, here we are. Yeah.
But I think that if we involve other people, they'll agree with us as well.
Well, listen, I've had a lot of wonderful conversations with a lot of terribly creative people, and the biggest thing, well, one of the things I've noticed thematically in these conversations is that people are generally happy to be in the middle of figuring out whatever the fuck is they're trying to do. And it's a lot more rare for people to have a really good idea of what it is.
Don't trust those
overall.
Fuckers. Don't trust
them. If they're like, oh, buddy, I got it all figured out, you walk the fuck away from that conversation. Turn around, show them your back, leave. Like that. Those aren't the people I want to talk to, and it's not so much that that I want to know what they know. It's that I don't want to find out how they trick themselves into figuring out what they thought they know. Like, I don't, that sounds like that's some straight fuckery I have no problem walking away from. And I just, if you can articulate to me your strengths and your struggles and not just be like, oh boy, this is how it works, I'm going to listen to your strengths and your struggles way more than I'm going to listen to somebody on a soapbox tell me how they all got it figured out.
Well, we all sometimes feel like we have it figured out. It's just after you live for a while, you get tossed on your ass enough.
Yeah. It's like how it's, what is it? It's asymptotic that the fucking around and the finding out continuously get closer together, but they never touch. There's always going to be that moment where everything is fine until it's not. But they're never the same moment. They can't be the same moment. But by God, they keep getting closer and closer. And that's also the irony of it.
It's like, what was that song? I've been listening to Billy Woods recently, and he's got this great song, and one of the lines is, nothing ever happens till it do.
True, yeah. No, I mean, the ball doesn't roll until you kick it. So, yeah, I get it. I would love to say we can talk some more, but my SD card is metaphorically yelling at me, saying that we have 11 minutes left. So,
it's good to have a stopping point. Otherwise, I think we could just chat forever.
I think I need to come back with a much less full SD card so we can just not worry about it. If you would tell people where they can find you on the internet, that would be great, and then we'll sign off of this thing.
Great. Well, my site is at vincentdrake.com. I don't remember what the Instagram handle is.
It's Artist Vincent Drake.
ArtistVincentDrake.com.
Were there other Vincent Drakes that you had to fight to get this?
I don't know. My wife handles the social and all.
Were there other Vincent Drakes you had to fight to handle this?
I think that is a no.
All right, cool.
But it was great talking to you.
Yeah.
And I know when you got here, I said it's going to be nice to have a long conversation with somebody, because usually it's 10 or 15 minutes. But I still feel like we didn't talk enough about it.
Well, I'll tell you, if you're interested, I try to do 1 to 3 like group shows where I have more than just 2 people on a microphone, and I try to do that. Like, one, for me, selfish, they're fun. I like it's a fun challenge to get everybody together and foster an intentional moment to have this conversation. And then 2, like inside the space of this intentional conversation is chaos. Like all the order is that I've set this up and we're all here.
Yes.
But the chaos is, what are we all going to say?
We kind of meandered, didn't we?
Yeah, and everybody does. And I love that because that doesn't make me have to steer the conversation to question to question to question instead of each little like question being its own island. It's more of a flowy river of a conversation.
It's nice to talk without having to have a point.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I have a list of questions and I can usually sort of skip around through them in a conversation without it being too forced. But
did we get to your questions?
Several of them, yes. We got to I think the only thing. I'm gonna ask you this one. We got 9 minutes.
All right.
What is one of my favorites? Is what does a good creative day for you look like?
A good creative day.
Yeah, a good creative day. If that exists in your life, what's it look like?
Well, I can tell you what I learned about that. Is last year I took about 9 months off. And going into that, I was really excited because I didn't have to work.
Mm-hmm.
I had enough savings to carry us through. And I was going to come in here and I was going to fucking get up 8 in the morning. I was going to work 8 hours in the studio and I was going to go home. I was going to have a regular, just fat session.
This was going to be your practice.
That was going to be my everyday. And I was fucking excited. And I'd get up in the morning, I'd watch cartoons or whatever, and I'd hang around, I'd have breakfast, I'd play with the dogs, and I'd get into the studio about 2.
Yeah.
And I'd spend most of my time just looking at what I had to do, and and it didn't change. I was still only working like a couple hours, 2-3 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
I might as well have been working, and at least I'd have some more money.
Yeah.
So, that ideal of having a perfect creative day and the reality of what I did with that perfect creative day were two different things.
They often are.
Yeah. So now I just look forward to going in and being able to bury myself in something for however long it takes, and knowing what to do one moment to the next. Too much of my time is spent wondering what to do next.
I get that. I do. Because when you can just dive into the thing and do what's needed when it's needed, then that's when you're in it and doing it. Yeah, I get that. When I'm sitting down working on my pieces, I find that a lot. Like Zen mode, flow state stuff, doing what I do, it's really easy for me to find that in what I do. And I love picking other creative people's brain and figuring out if they do and if they find it, where they find it in their practice. And that's it's really important to me to be able to achieve that in my practice because that's the helpful part of my artistic practice. So it's comforting to me in some way knowing that other creative people find this opportunity or this window or this release, however you want to say that, in their work and their creative practice.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew a way to reproduce that.
If that happened on demand, it would be terrible and wonderful at the same time. But Vincent, thank you very much for being a guest on the KAAMP. That is the Knoxville Area Artist Network and Platform podcast thing. Like I've said before, the piece pretty fluid. If y'all would do the things that good listeners do, like sharing and then playing it in the car without your friend's consent, that'd be really cool too. Nobody's told me what their friends have said yet when they just turn it on and don't say anything until their friend's like, what the fuck is this? I'm waiting for that story. Like, I don't have a lot of goals for the podcast, but I really want somebody to be like, yeah, I turned that shit on in the car the other day and my friend asked me what the hell was going on. I want somebody to tell me that.
We're going to have to start shocking and offending people.
Oh, you mean I haven't done that already? Darn. I was really trying. But everybody, thanks for listening. Y'all are the best. I'm going to play some music and we're going to roll out of here.